Ready to go? All right, panel number one. I'm really excited. I know all of these folks and they are integral partners in this independent school process and are people that you need to get to know, those who hold their positions in other schools. Before I introduce them, I do want to say that we are doing some broad strokes this evening. We have our Fairchester experts. Fairchester is Lower Fairfield County and Westchester County combined together. There are a tremendous amount of independent schools in these areas, and you're going to hear from the experts from these schools, but we're making this broad because a lot of this applies to all of our independent schools. So no matter where you're applying, you're going to glean a lot of great information, whether you've been accepted, whether you've been waitlisted, or whether you've received a no, or if you haven't received anything yet, or if you're thinking about, I'm going to apply next year. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Ali, I'm going to introduce Dr. Alecia, I'm going to introduce Amber, and I'm going to introduce Bobby by way of them introducing themselves, giving you their name, what school they come from, and what their favorite show is. What have they been binging? Because since COVID, I don't know about you, but I've been binging and I'm proud of it. Okay, so Ali, you want to kick it off?
You got it.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. So good to see you all and certainly be here with some of my colleagues. So again, my name is Ali Morgan. I'm the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at RIISE Country Day School. Also wear a few more hats, which is very common, but I'll mention them quickly. I teach drama and history. I also coach tennis in the middle school, and I'm a dad in the school. My daughter's in 7th grade and has been there since kindergarten. I would say, I mean, you got to start with Abbott Elementary. It's just, and then I'm also, seeing Blackish wind down, right? So, but I would say Abbott Elementary. I mean, that's hard to, that's it. So there you go. And I'm gonna pass it over to Dr. Thomas.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Alecia Thomas. I am a diversity director. I'm the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging at Brunswick School. I have a little boy who is in the 3rd grade, and I also have a little guy who is 3 years old, who is slated for Brunswick. I am also the program coordinator for Horizons, which is a summer program here at Brunswick School. And I am currently binging Sweet Magnolias on Netflix. So that's it.
Thank you.
And I'll pass it over to Bobby Walker.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bobby Walker Jr. I am at Greenwich Academy in my 2nd year here. My title is Assistant Head for Student and Community Life. But although I've only been here 2 years, my wife is the head of middle school. She's been here for 17. I have a daughter in the class of 2020 who is a lifer, a daughter in the class of 2026. Unless she gets kicked out, she'll be a lifer. And I have a son who's a junior hanging out with Dr. Thomas over at Brunswick School. And been binge watching 2 different shows. One I'm binge watching is All American, and the other that my son and I, we really enjoy is Raising Dion. So we're getting ready to, we haven't jumped into season 2, but we plan on doing that this weekend with a few days off. So, and Amber, you're up.
Hi, everyone. I am Amber Berry. I'm the head of middle school at St. Luke's School. I have been on the Hilltop for 12 years now. I started full-time in the classroom as Madame Berry. I am a French teacher, and I have an 8th grade advisory this year. I have to say that Abbott Elementary was going to be what I said. My husband and I just started The Alpinist after watching Free Solo last year, and that's a nail biter, but I'd be lying if I didn't say I'm looking forward to season 2 of Bridgerton, and I think we're 40 days away. Who's counting? But thank you so much for having us, and we're so excited to talk to you tonight.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Well, we're just going to kick right into it. I call this panel the Trust and Transparency panel. And it is really, to Bobby's point, it's right in his title. It's about community in independent schools. And that is what many of us will find. And I wanted to start off with Bobby asking how are independent schools building community within a dominant culture. And when I say a dominant culture, a white and affluent culture. So how are independent schools building community within the dominant culture? And part two of that would be, how do you in your role partner with the admissions team for more equity and inclusion? So what does building community really mean for you?
So I'll kick off, and I'm looking at my co-host, and all y'all are sitting here like, yeah, let me get a piece of that. So whatever I don't answer, please do. So I think the first thing that we've been really focused on here at GA is the concept of providing space, actual spaces and places where kids of color can truly belong. And by providing that, you provide this safety net where they always have a place to go. They always have people there who have their backs. But it's more than just providing that. Once a child feels that they have a connection to a school, they then begin to branch out. They then begin to take advantage of other aspects of school. So right now, I mean, our student body president is this just very tall, elegant Black girl who is just running everything here. And she's sort of progressed through all these different spaces. And as she's found her voice, as she's found what makes her tick here, I think she's been able to sort of showcase who she is and what she has to offer to the school. The other thing that we've done in some of those spaces, we also provided leadership opportunities. So all of our student affinity groups, for instance, last year they were teacher-led. This year they're actually student-led. And the students were able to select who their president and vice presidents were. And so all of a sudden you have kids of varying hues, of varying backgrounds in multiple leadership roles. And in those leadership roles, not only in that small group, they play a bigger leadership role in the student body as a whole. And so once you have voices present, I think that you then begin to build that sense of community so that people who traditionally at times been silent are now speaking up, and they're being sought after for what they have to say. And I think that's been a really important piece. I don't know if any other panelists want to jump. Oh, and the way in which, I'm sorry, I'm partnering with admission directly is I work quite hand in hand with Nina Hanlon. I think a lot of times, some of the things that we're working on right now, our big issue, and we'll own it, is transportation. So Nina and I are actually partnering with, not only how can we get more kids here, but what does that whole process actually mean? It's one thing to get on a bus, but what is the experience at school like for a child who begins his or her day, I guess in our case, her day, at 5:15 in the morning? And how is that experience uniquely different from the child who rolls out of bed that lives across the street at 7:30? And what parts of that experience can the school work with? What parts of that can the school help foster a better sense of belonging? So that's been like a very unique project that we're working on right now, aside from other things, just talking about the overall student experience. I'm quiet.
Thank you. Thank you, Bobby. I appreciate that. I have a question for each one of you, and I will let you again weigh in on the other questions. Anyone want to add to that really quickly?
Bobby, you handled that so well. Come on, man. You covered a lot of the important themes. I'll just add that, and this is something that will apply to a lot of things. You also, sort of from the adult standpoint, a lot of what we're doing is obviously always about the kids. You need white folks leading the charge. You need white folks who on your campus will do this work alongside us, who understand it deeply. There are more of them than us. And so it's something different when they're also doing the work. And that's evolution, that's a process, but I want to name that because, that's one of the key pieces to it, and particularly, around more seats at the table and things like that, which you talked about. I'm so excited. I can't wait to meet. We do a lot of work across school. I can't wait to meet this young lady at GA. Go ahead, Bobby and team. So that's the quick thing I wanted to add.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. That is important. Community means everything, and we often hear our schools talk about community, but it's good to know what that looks like in action. And I would say that what Bobby shared, most schools are doing similar things, taking deeper dives to make sure that voice and visibility of all stakeholders is readily available, and how students move through spaces, move through community is extremely important as well. So Amber, are you ready for your question? How, particularly as the head of middle school, correct?
Yes.
School, and also an educator, a teacher as well. How do Black and Brown scholars, how are they thriving? What does thriving look like? We often hear thriving versus surviving, but at the same time, how are they also negotiating potential moments of trauma that many marginalized communities can feel in independent schools?
Thank you for this question. It's so thoughtful because, we wouldn't be admitting or living our mission if we were admitting students and not taking care of them and their families. And so we believe as independent schools that it's all about relationships. Your children they're bright and they're excited learners, and they're looking for these opportunities to be in spaces where their name is always known, where they're connected to adults in the building. I think most of us would say, the secret sauce, the difference about an independent school is that every child is known, and not known by everybody. I have an advisory of 8 students, and 2 of them, I know that when they're upset, they won't come to me. I know one goes to their 6th grade English teacher, the other goes to a coach. What we're responsible for is making sure that our kids have safe places. It is even better, we know that they can thrive when there's some mirroring happening between our student body and our faculty. And that's a struggle in independent schools. I've been part of the hiring process formally for at least 8 years at St. Luke's, highly involved, and we still have high turnover, and we're really focused on how can we get more Black and Brown teaching faculty in our building, retain them, develop them? And I'm a story of that working really successfully, but I only stay because I see what my role is in helping kids thrive. What does it look like? It looks like kids who are, they found something that's working for them. It's okay if not every child is excelling in athletics and academics and on the stage and in music, but we are looking to make sure that kids feel the confidence somewhere, and we are exposing them to more experiences to make sure that we figure out what that is for every child. We also talk a lot about well-being. We're hearing it everywhere. It's very much in the news. It's very COVID-centric in how mental health is so central. And again, we are all about the kids. Our schools exist for kids. We also, St. Luke's, for example, our strategic plan, one of our major pillars is well-being. And it's not just students, because if faculty aren't well, if the families aren't well at home, then we know that kids will struggle. So the thriving is really focusing on that. And negotiating trauma, I will say that even last year, our HR manager partnered with our director of equity and inclusion to create some protocols. What do we do when mistakes happen? It's usually about intent, impact. It was not intentional harm to a child or to a faculty member, et cetera. But what does it mean to go through a process of education, of accountability, and those kinds of conversations didn't exist necessarily in all spaces a while ago, but we know that at least from summer 2020, a lot of us have been far more introspective with our boards, with our senior leadership, and me having a seat at that table has been really transformative to working in partnership to do a better job every day. We know better, we do better on behalf of kids.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, a lot of intentional work since the summer of 2020. And I tell many families, there's no better time, in my opinion, to apply to an independent school, because there's a lot of heart work and good work going on. And you led us to a perfect segue, Amber, into strategic plans. So I wanted to ask Dr. Alecia Thomas at Brunswick School, give us some examples of what strategic plans are looking like for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, there's that other word, belonging. There's another word, justice. So you can find that acronym can be stretched out from DEI to DEIBJ. Since 2020, a lot of schools have had demands from students to make our schools live up to their very mission. So can you talk a little bit about what a strategic DEI plan can look like? Again, it could be different for all schools, but what should it look like? And what can it look like?
Yeah, thank you for this question. Actually, I was just looking at this document today and actually working through this document. So this is a perfect question. I think, with in 2020, we've all known a lot of our schools with, the Black Hat, with alums and everyone mobilizing and saying, okay, we need a voice, just like everyone was talking about, we need that agency in our schools. I know, at least for our school, we have what is called the call to action. And that allowed us to be at the seat, right? We were at the table, right? We interfaced with every single department in our school, right? So we from human resources on to the curriculum piece, on to admissions. And what that actually qualified was that we needed to be there, right? We needed our voice, we needed our say. In most schools, I will say, at least for me, our school, we have 6 priority items in our strategic plan. It goes from admissions, which you will hear from the panel number 2 later. And the admissions process was, okay, how do we have representation in our school, right? How do we, number one, onboard our Black and Brown students? How do we onboard our Black and Brown families? What is the process that we should look for in the admissions process? Is not just so much getting them here, but it's also what do we do while they're here? And also to the hard question that a lot of our schools have, we had to really go in and we had to do a deep dive and look at the data, right? We had to look at every single class and say, okay, if we have these amount of students, do we have other students who will mirror this child, right? And so it was a hard truth. It was a hard truth we had to sit with from every single asset of the school. And then that brought into the faculty piece. Do we have someone within that division that child can look to and say, hey, he or she looks like me? If not, then how do we provide training? So that goes into another priority. How do we provide training for our faculty? How do we provide training, especially within the advisories? And, how do we help our faculty to talk to these students, right? One of the things that we know in a lot of our independent schools is that we do not have a 50-50 mirroring, right? Our students, our Black and Brown students are in our schools, and, they're also being, the mirror also amongst the faculty is also, there's not a lot of them to qualify. However, with that said, you can still train the faculty. You can still empower the faculty to be that child's advocate, to be that child's agency. And it's all about empowerment. And how we did that through courageous conversation. Because we all know when this happened, we really had to take a look in the mirror. We had to, every single person, and we really had to come to terms with the role that we played in this systemic platform that we exist in. And it was a hard truth for some of us, most of us, I'm assuming, no matter where we are. We also looked at students, right? It's really about students. What kind of space are we providing for students? And then this went back to old age debates as, should we have affinity groups? People started pulling up books from way back in the day, Beverly Tatum, Why Do All the Black Kids Sit Together in the Cafeteria? Like, let's really look at this book, right? Let's dissect this book. Should they? What's going on? What did she really mean behind that, right? So we have affinity spaces for students. And then the question then came about with, what kind of affinity spaces, right? You can have affinity spaces for anything that you could think of, but what is the need? So then that brings us back to the first part of creating a call to action, is doing a needs assessment of the institution, a DEIB needs assessment of the institution. What is needed and what do we need to do? And then we also looked at the place where we accept the students. How do we get them there? Right. I saw someone in the chat had a question about transportation, which is huge, right? How do we, and when they are there, what is the quality of their day? is quantity over quality. There is a difference between a child who has to get up at 5:15 a.m. in the morning to do a 2-hour commute to school versus a child who lives right down the street. But it can still work, right? If you put the parameters in place to ensure that when that child who gets up at 5:15 a.m. in the morning and have to take a train and a bus, etc., that when they get to school, it may not feel so burdensome. And the way you do that is to make sure that all the emotional parameters are in place to support not only that child, but to support that student, the parent. And it's not about dismissal and then you go back home on a train. It's also about follow-up, all the way until that child opens that door to go back to their home. So it's from the beginning to the end. So I do think that in 2020, things has been brought to the surface. One of the things I do want to say, though, and I must say this, prior to Brunswick, I was at Fairfield Prep for 17 years and in the diversity director's role. And what I will say is that a lot of this work was happening. I want to say that this is not new, right? But I do welcome 2020 because a lot of this work allowed it to be put into action. So this work in independent schools was always happening. But now, to Amber's point, there is a seat at the table and there's that acknowledgement, right? One of the things, and I'm going to stop because I could talk about this all day. I told you I was looking at this document. One of the things we subscribe to when we actually do go into classes as well, and we teach classes, which is age appropriate. So I'm in the, we go into the preschool classes and we teach the little guys. We go into the lower school classes, then the middle school classes and the upper school classes. But one of the things that our motto is in our office is ACT, act, acknowledge, commit, and transform. Right. So we take that, and it's the act is a you could Google it. It's there. And it's just like, we have to acknowledge that the work was always happening. But now it's time for us to commit. And commit takes work. And this is conversations and uncomfortable conversations, but it's okay because we're going to have them courageously. And once we can have that dialogue and we talk about it, then we can work on transforming. And that is what I will say the call to action in 2020 brought to our institution. And I will say, in all my 21 years of doing this work, this is the best place. I'm excited. This is good. The work is being done, and I'm super excited to be a part of it.
Me too. Me too. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Alecia. So another great segue into Ali. Let's be futuristic right now. Really quickly, what are you excited about in the future? If we're acting right now, what do you envision? What do you see for our students and for the families? Because our families are also a part of this experience as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that one. I think, as an educator and being surrounded by educators, that is I think what drives us every day, right? I think that's what, and I have to acknowledge the education space broadly. I've worked in higher ed. I've worked in public, private, and so I love where I am is important, and I believe in it. And we'll talk about that. That's why we're here. I want to acknowledge all the folks who contribute to that, including our parents and guardians. Right, y'all are here, and I think that parent advocacy piece, that parent commitment, the strong foundation from home is really at the heart of everything you've been hearing and we're talking about. And so I think a child thriving really starts at home. And I'm a dad too, so of course I can, I know it from that lens, but I also bring that part of myself to the role for all the children, certainly the Black and brown kids, but everybody. And so, and I'm not the only one, right? That's what the investment is. That's part of what it is. But don't make me quote no Maya Angelou or no Nikki Giovanni. We know we rise, and that will continue. None of this is new. We know the ancestors are with us for sure. But success is really our heritage. I really believe that. And I think that is real. That's palpable. That's the folks working hard, sacrificing every day for this, right? Why? And again, that's not unique to Black and brown folks. But I think it's worth mentioning that when you think about why would I, even go, invest in something like this. I also like to think about our alums, right? which is interesting because some may say, or some may be, may navigate that carefully thinking, oh, well, that was the group that really led the charge in the movement. We had a true movement. It's still going on, but we had a true movement a couple summers ago. We called it the Summer of Social Justice. We worked all summer. Oh man, but it was so worth it. And what I said was, they loved us, but love, I think, is still active enough to tell us we need to do better. You need to do much better. And so we listened and we listened and we listened. So, we got Sam on here. I think the alums that I'm still in touch with, you've been doing this long enough, you have that wonderful thing that can only happen when you've invested and worked with young people, mentor them, and they stay in touch. So many success stories, right? Yes, they can be successful, anywhere, but our communities, independent schools, have some unique things. We have resources. We have that dedicated time, right? We have a long tradition, right, of being able to really open doors and do some cool stuff. If you look at, I'm sorry, many of you are deep down this now, and I don't want to do, I know our missions team is like, wait, Ali, we're next. Hold on now. But, some of the global programs and things like that, these are moments when they thrive. Now, I would have to call out some of what we do to stay, to ensure thriving on the adult side, because it ties to the kids. One of our conferences, POCC SDLC. If that's not thriving, I don't know what is. So the National Association of Independent School, been doing this a very long time, since the late 80s, where we come together, and it's open to everybody, but it was intended to honor and affirm people of color. And those folks, listen, it's something to behold. And then there's a partner or an adjacent conference with a Student Diversity Leadership Conference, which is for all kinds of students and really is about DEI. And yes, the last couple of years has been virtual. They've done a good job at that. I don't know how, but they did a good job at that. And we're hoping we can get back in person later this year. It's always in December. So much thriving going on. I can go on and on about it, but I think that if I had to summarize, I would say it goes back to where we started. When Bobby, just sharing a little bit, gave us a little slice with the student, which I'm going to meet this young woman, but this is what can happen at our school. That you can have a young person who then becomes Sam Osborne, who is true to themselves and then owns the place, right? And that's really what we want for everybody. But it can actually happen, and it does happen, all right? This is not theory. It happens. I have a daughter did the same thing at Chapin, So just wanted to say, we will continue to thrive. This is what our ancestors wanted, and we will continue to honor them each day.
Ashe. All right, so you all are ready for some attendee questions. We're going to make this a lightning round because I do want to maintain our time and get your peer admissions folks on. So you ready for some quick responses? Okay, great. So Bobby, I'm going to circle right back around to you. So the first question says, is diversity more impactful than educational environment? I'm going to ask that again. Is diversity more impactful than educational environment? The follow-up question to that is, when do you draw the distinctions based on the developmental ages of children? That's a lot, but we're used to complex questions. So what's more important, the number of Black and brown kids, or the amount of socioeconomic diversity or intellectual diversity versus just, the building and all of the pretty things?
Yeah, I mean, listen, buildings and, the old adage, if you build it, they'll come, right? I mean, I've heard that so often, but I actually don't necessarily believe that, because if there's not substance inside of those walls, then what those walls look like and what's inside matters very little. And so for me, anyone that removes diversity from educational excellence, I actually think they're missing a point, because I actually don't think that the two are mutually exclusive. And we're at a point in our country where we continue to talk about diversity and educational excellence as two opposing things, right? That if you're achieving in one place, you can't achieve in the other. And I think that whole framework and that conversation desperately needs to change. Because if you're truly educating a child and you're truly trying to prepare him or her for the broader world, how can you not talk about where all those things you're learning in the classroom and how that actually prepares you to talk, interact, and be around other people? I would hate to have a world full of very smart book people who can't talk to someone else, who doesn't come from their background, because that's not making any kind of progress for any community. So That's the first part. The second part, what was it again?
I think it was pretty similar to, like, I guess it was the developmental piece. You know, when is it more appropriate? I think, you know, Dr. Alecia was talking about that earlier too. You know, you do it based on age appropriateness. Like CRT is not happening in K through 12. Can we just put that on the table?
Listen, any school that's worth its salt knows how to have various conversations with kids at appropriate developmental stages. However, diversity is present from birth till death. And anyone who thinks that there is a time to have a conversation with a child about how they see and treat other people, I vehemently disagree with that. I think those conversations start the minute your child can understand speech. And better yet, once you do it from the minute they can even see images. And so I've always challenged my friends who don't look like me. I asked them to look at their children's library and ask them how many different groups of people your child being exposed to when you open that picture book. Wow. So I look at it very differently. So I'll be quiet.
No, thank you for that. I like that analogy with the library. Thank you so much. Okay, important question and an even more important answer. Thank you. So I'm going to move on to you, Amber. Okay, so you're in the classroom with students. How do you think the school environment addresses race and socioeconomic differences between students? We just heard earlier, like we start to pay attention to how early is someone waking up when logistically they are different logistically and how far away they are from the school. But can you think of some other examples? And how do, part two, how do we avoid potential stigma of the financial aid kid label? Maybe we'll start with that question. I think that's even better. How do we, because, you know, I always tell folks, they're like, well, we don't receive financial aid. Well, that's great, but I will tell you, most people think you do.
Yep.
And if you don't, you know, so how do we avoid that stigma? Can we ever really get rid of that? And does it even matter?
That is such a good question. I was going to qualify with not all Black and brown children are receiving financial aid or do have to commute from far, but where we do have a majority, I have seen the conversation has happened for a long time at my school about what's better to get more kids in the door who maybe we don't have the funding to send them on every trip they might want to go on to, or to, you know, do travel experiences, or to, you know, would we rather just have more students who maybe receive less, or do we want to bring in fewer students who could have a full range from 5th grade through 12th grade in my school's experience to do absolutely anything that, you know, they think of wanting to do. And we haven't nailed it because, you know, needs vary, et cetera, et cetera. But that said, I've been more personally in the camp of I'd rather have more students there getting that educational opportunity. And, you know, when I first started, we really didn't have the flexibility of providing experiences for middle school students at the same level as upper school. And it's not on par, but we are really making progress in the ability to send a 7th grader to Quebec, and they don't have to stay behind. We anticipate needs. We have the school, we call it St. Luke's Closet. And lots of families, even families who I genuinely believe could buy a new wardrobe every year, use the dress code clothes, and they come in throughout the summer and the school year to take advantage of that. But we think about what might kids need and we anticipate it. Anytime there's a new initiative, a new idea that teachers bring that might be opt-in, we think about who might need that access first. We don't publish financial aid at our school. I legitimately do not know every middle school student who's on FA. I'm sure my counterpart Ginny would tell me if I asked, but that's not it. I just anticipate the needs. It's having that whole team. It's deans and everybody. We have a concert or a play at night, and I know I'm going to send an email to all parents and say, who maybe can't get home and come back? We're going to have pizza in this space, supervised, just RSVP so we have enough food. And so we're not asking folks to figure it out or manage their own way. We really are trying to bring them into the fold. And I think that's just so important that our families trust us to tell us when we're missing something. And we're also really trying to think about the whole experience.
Great. Thank you so much. I believe we've answered this question already, but I, you know, for the purpose of whoever posed that in the registration, I wanted to respectfully kind of just mention it, but we did hear how schools are being proactive and purposeful by prioritizing diversity with faculty and curriculum, and particularly in art, music, and literature. And it's not always an easy thing to do, attracting more Black and Brown faculty members. Does anyone quickly want to talk about what that has looked like? And I don't want to spend too much time because we have a couple of more questions, but it's put it this way. Let's just say this. I think we're also responsible as parents too, to help our schools identify faculty, potential faculty members. We all know teachers, and we need to be able to say, hey, you should really consider an independent school. Amber, you raised your hand.
I just wanted to say that we do have, St. Luke's has started a consortium of schools, and a number of Fairchester schools participate, where we share resumes. I mean, maybe I come across a candidate who's outstanding, but I don't have an English opening. So I'll share that resume with Brunswick because I know that they're looking. And we've created this network of sharing our resources and not competing head to head, because it's less helpful when that one-star candidate is really, we're all salivating for that one teacher. And so the sharing, the openness, the strategizing together, we've done kind of in-person events to even educate more teachers of color that what is an independent school, because many maybe don't know because they didn't attend one themselves.
Great. Okay, so we're going to go on to another really quick question, and then we're going to push on with panel 2. You all have been tremendous. Panel 1, the truth and transparency, I'm really respecting that. So how do you, Dr. Alecia, how would you say folks, so this is the question, how do we know if we're a good match for a school? So for example, let's say you've received 2 or 3 offers, right? And that could be as difficult as hearing a no in some ways. How do we decide? How do I know that I'm a good match for this school? Can you think of 2 things that come to mind that parents should be aware of to identify if they are a good fit for a school, or if the school is a good fit for them?
That's a really good question. The first thing I want to say before I answer this question is this notion of good fit, right? And oftentimes we qualify ourselves in spaces as to whether or not we are a good fit. And as Black and Brown people, we want to get away from that notion of fit, because we're looking like, okay, how do we fit into the culture that's already there? And so we're already taking ourselves out of it. The first thing, so I say that to say, when you I always say visit. You, number one, will get a feel. Visit the school. Rachel Oken is on the call, and I know she's coming up next, but that is her number one. She always says that. Visit the school, because you get a feel for the school. The second piece I will say is, do understand that you are bringing value to the school. So while you are visiting the school and, you're going through all the different areas, I mean, literally from walking into a classroom to walking into the cafeteria, to walking down the stairs, to walking across the quad, you should look at that as, what can I bring to this school? Because remember, we want to get away from this, and it's this, I'm going to say it because this is a transparency piece. We want to get away from this intimidation thing that sometimes we have within ourselves, within our psyche. Because once you have that, how am I a good fit? You automatically come on these campuses and you're nervous and you're fearful and you don't want to say the wrong thing. And you're just so super appreciative of the opportunity. But there's the other side. How will you become an addendum, right? How can you add to this school? So I will say, you will know, and I'm putting it in quotations, right? You will know if you're a good fit, number one, by visiting the school, because you'll automatically get the feel. And then you will know, number two, if you're a good fit, because there is you, a part of you that you can bring to enhance this school, right? And it's not a level of cockiness. It's just you becoming a change agent, right? And I'm saying this with the student, and I'm also saying this as parents. When you walk with your child in this school, don't already walk in thinking, oh my gosh, I hope I could get in. Oh my gosh, this is great. Is he even going to fit in here? No. He will fit in here, or she. I'm saying he because I'm an all boys school, but the reality is it's
Okay.
more so than how can we enhance the school?
Right.
So I definitely want to make sure we get as parents, we have that understanding that it's not about the good fit, is what can you bring? How can you enhance? Because you already got it. You just have to bring it. But I will say though, visit. You definitely have to visit because the key is you have to get a feel.
Yeah, that's been a little tough for some folks. You know, they might not even have had the chance to visit until after they've received acceptance, and it is a gut feeling. So I thank you for that, because that is the epitome of ownership right there. So we're going to thank you, Dr. Alecia, for that. So Ali, we're going to close with you with this question from attendees, and two families have asked this question, and I've heard it through folks that I know as well. How, if you do not get the response or the outcome that you wanted, how can we help our children understand that the outcomes of the admissions decision is not personal? That was one question. Similarly, how do you assist your child and their emotions as you reach the decision process?
Great questions, tough questions. And I know some of that I assume will come up or continue to come up with our second part with our admissions folks who, leaders. I think, it really starting, obviously some of this will be adjusted by age, right? With the pre-K or K or, younger student, it's going to be very different than a middle schooler or a high schooler. But I think it's really engaging the students fully in the process. And I know that sounds obvious, but I mean that as a family. So I think there should be family conversations going on about what we're trying to do. What are our goals for this process, right? Some of it are obvious, some are not. It's ultimately an opportunity. And that concept of opportunity is going to follow you all the way through life. College, for sure, everyone knows that. That's kind of what the ultimate goal is for all of our schools, even if you go to 8th grade or 9th grade, is to get them, we're college prep type schools. But it's really thinking about that holistically. So it's not just, so I think there's a lot of things in their lives we can speak to. It comes up with the arts. I'm an arts teacher. It comes up with sports. I'm a coach as well. Like, these are things that are going to, hopefully aren't new, and I know they're not, at home, and so I think connecting it to that, so it's something that they understand, and really, I think that'll lessen it a little bit. I think you also want to be realistic, right? And again, there's no one way to do it. And I think ultimately, your family, your family values, your family, kind of how you talk about things. So I think you would want to build on that. But I do think, one of the things Courtney and I talk a lot about at our school is it's over time, right? So we're very open about, we get excited about, whether, a family that has been accepted and want them to come and that kind of thing. But we also talk about the process over time. So sometimes going through it the first time is the first time, right? Now, there are many people who don't want or not interested in the second time, which I respect. But one of the things we try to open it up a little bit and say, let's keep working at this. What do we learn? And again, that's like anything in life, right? It's in their classroom space right now with their teaching. I guess there are some people getting hundreds on everything, but most of us, there's some feedback there, right? We can work on something, right? And if you're open to it, I think that's really a place I would start with that. But ultimately, it's not the end all be all. Even if it works out the way you want, you're just getting started, right? It's an investment. And so that's how I would approach it.
Yeah, everything is in divine order. Thank you all, panel number one. We have some really great questions that came into the chat, and we're not going to have time to get to them right now. We got to move on to the folks who say yes, maybe, or sorry, right? But what I would like to ask our panelists is if I can get you some of these questions, and we can begin to speak to that during the week and next week with RIISE, right? So maybe it'll be a Q&A that we'll just post on the website and on Instagram. These questions continue to come back up over time, so we will have an opportunity to answer these really, really great questions. So thank you very much. Panel number one, y'all rock. Thank you so much for working to make our schools be all that they can be, and for loving on our kids and all children. And take care of yourselves. Thank you. And we'll be back in touch really soon. How's that? All right. Does everyone want to give a big up to panel number one? And again, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Dr. Alecia, Amber, and Bobby. All right.